now have some questions.
Yes.
We have quite many, I think.
Yeah, I think we can start with something for OrganoClick, since we didn't just need to see where that was the last OrganoClick. There it is. So, Johannes, if you're ready, you will get some. Yeah, the first one was biodegradability, how you have tested that. And I've got a couple of questions about that. Is it related to a specific standard or?
The biodegradability is tested according to OECD 301. So that's like a common standard for biodegradability on well, any chemical product, which mimics like aerobic conditions.
Yeah. Is that on things that are washed out from a treated garment, or is it on the formulation itself?
That's on the formulation itself, but since we have like our formulation doesn't contain any as such consider classical reactive chemistry that is like cured through chemical, like we believe that this is not of any like significant influence.
Yeah, so it's pretty much the same, which is tested anyway. Okay, thank you. Yes, and then we are talking about the holy grail of repellency treatment, oil repellency. I got a couple of questions around that, both for you at OrganoClick and generally. Is there anything available that is PFAS free today that can give oil and dirt repellents?
Like usually not in combination, as of my knowledge yet, with water repellency. Of course, there are like ways to repel oil, but then those surfaces wouldn't repel water in the same way that water repellents do.
Okay, yeah. And regarding dirt repellency, do you have any comments on that? Because that's sort of something in between and something which is often requested and required to prolong the lifespan of garments and fabrics in general. I mean, for all types of uses, really.
Like dirt repellency is, of course, a very big topic also in not only in the outdoor industry, but in many different like industries where fabrics are deployed. I think that like there are challenges with how to evaluate this, because there are so many different like types of dirt and such that can be evaluated. But it's definitely we take on as something to that we also test for when we evaluate our products, but it's usually not the main focus, since there is still a very big like there is a big market for main focus on water repellency.
Maybe I can add to that we also have several workwear and sort of more protective wear companies present today, and then there, of course, the dirt and sort of the more resistance to chemicals and like sparks, etc., is very important. So it's an even more challenging substitution work to really find an alternative that fulfills the requirements that are needed. But I would say that that's for sure more innovation that is needed in order to find both sort of waterproof and dirt resistant and sort of solutions.
But I want to stress that garment life can also like be ensured by regular like washing and re-impregnation. So it's not necessarily that dirt repellency is needed in order to provide like a long-lived garment, according to our conviction.
I would like to add to that we see also the importance for customer support for how to care and repair for your garments are becoming increasingly important. We see that a lot of customers are repairing. It seems like they don't have the knowledge of how to repair the garments. So the support to customers around this is very important as well.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, and also we have mentioned it, and it's mentioned in the guide as well a little bit deeper, but the interaction between the chemistry and the fabric itself, all the properties of the fabric, what type of fiber, the structure, the density of the fabric, all of that comes into play when you in the end measure the water repellence. And the water repellence can be greatly enhanced by choosing the right fiber, the right structure of the fiber, and the right weaving technique or knitting technique for it. So there's a lot to be done there already. And this is all often overlooked because we have had chemistry that is so efficient that you can take whatever, a potato bag and smear it onto it and it becomes water repellent. But we will move away from that situation because we don't want those chemistries in a potato bag. Another question. Yeah, we have a question also from Casper to Johannes about the biomimicry aspect. What examples from nature have you been inspired by and are mimicking in your development?
Like there are many and they're different for like different products, but I think of course like the classic example in water repellents are of course like leaves that have like a layer of water repelling like chemistry on them, although there are other examples as well, like for example duck feathers and the like. I think we have mostly been inspired by leaf properties and like how not only considering the chemistry that leaves use, but also kind of like in a physical way, how they are equipped to repel water.
Thank you. Yep, then I have a couple of questions to Lisa also. First of all, the total flora analysis, can it be done on a product as a whole, or does it have to be on one material at a time?
I mean, basically, you would sort of, if you have like a hard product, like a hard surface, you would try to sort of scrape off like the surface, and you would sort of make small fibers out of a textile, and sort of, so there's a lot of cutting and sort of preparing the samples but basically you could evaluate, because you do the incineration, so you could analyze hard like plastic or fibers or a liquid. It's because you do the incineration first.
Yeah, but generally you do it on a very small sample of full product, so you do not incinerate the full product. And
no, it's too much. So then you need to, like, if you would have a backpack, for example, you would take some from the strap, some from the front side, from the sort of protective. So you would then analyze different parts of the product. And one analysis is incineration. There's also PIGE, which is more measures on the surface. So there are sort of two different techniques to measure total fluorine.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have a question also about the Finn's conclusions when looking at the fabrics, and that was. You said, Lisa, that all fabrics eventually become wet, have film forming or water, and it's important that the membrane is good. Does that imply that for PFAS-free treatments you need better membranes, or was that a general sort of view of it?
I think that's more a question to the sort of the fabric or garment expert, but I mean, if you have heavy rain, all the garments get wet and quite fast. But I think I passed that question about the membrane to Bergans or Houdini.
I think this is a very important question, actually, because that is also something that we focus in our consumer communication, that we have to differentiate between the waterproofness, which is done by the membrane, and that's still working, of course. If it's PFAS-free membrane, even better. But then the water repellency, which we talked about today, and that means how fast the outer fabric get wet, and what Lisa said, what was the conclusion from Finse. And of course, and the other thing is, I think it's then we have again the mindset from the consumers. At Finse we had several hours of rain, and that's where we experienced that anyhow any fabric gets wet. But most consumers won't maybe use their outer gear in that heavy conditions. But of course, there are product categories that need best weather protection, and there are a lot of other product categories that won't be exposed to these harsh conditions. So I think this is also important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and to clarify, maybe it was clear, but this also includes then PFAS jackets. So we had some that had C6 and they were also getting wet. Yes. So it's not only for the PFAS-free, it's
any garments.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have the choice of choosing not PFAS as well.
Thank you.
Good comment, Malva.
That's a good closing comment. The question is, do we want to close on time, or do we want to continue?
I think we can, for those who want, we can stay for a while. I think it's important. I have some questions here in my chat, and I guess you have some more as well.
So we say that, okay, for the official time is over, but we will stay on for the continued questions. We will also collect the questions, and if there are some unanswered, we will make sure that they get answered in the send out afterwards. So yeah.
And at beginning of next week, it will not happen today and probably not on Monday, but beginning of next week, we will send everybody that has registered to this event the link to the guide. I mean, you can find it already now on the POPFREE website, and also the link to the recordings of these presentations if you want to look at them again, or forward them to your network and your suppliers to sort of as a tool for increasing awareness. So you will receive an email beginning of next week. And in all the presentations, you also have the contact details to the presenters. So you can also email any of us directly with questions and comments. Yeah, we hope that we really try to inspire in sort of working with the PFAS substitution and to really collaborate. It's more effective and it's also more fun to collaborate than doing things only on your own.
Yes. Okay, so let's take some further questions. You had some, Lisa.
Yes, one is if there are like many different types of chemical finishes, I assume in a factory, how will the manufacturers manage this in terms of waste, chemical and water, cleaning down and cross-contamination? Any thoughts on that? Maybe from Bergens and Hodini.
And I think that's a very fair question, because I mean, like sitting in Europe and our suppliers sitting somewhere else, chemical management, I mean, this is going kind of crossover, and it's very important to have good control. So I think that's really something to look into together with our partners and our fabric suppliers, which is really important, but also to support on the phase out.
Yeah, and I think that, couldn't you see that in the test that you showed, Lisa, that even though the jacket was PFAS-free DWR, it had some contamination from PFAS substances anyway. So I think the contamination is a really important area to kind of handle And I know that some facilities have actually built like another building for the PFAS-free DWRs to not get contamination, because it's so easy to get contamination if you have them in the same facility.
And that we also see in other industries, the risk for contamination. If you do PFAS and PFAS-free in the same factory, there's a big chance for cross-contamination. I have a question here. Is the PFAS-free substances more expensive to use from fabrics from chemical supplier? And is this also a reason to why it's not being used more in the textile industry? Or is it more awareness?
I think in the beginning, when we started, like in 2013, when we started phasing out PFAS, we actually had to pay more to have PFAS-free treatments. But now I would say it's becoming so common that we don't have any like price increase for PFAS-free products compared to if you would have PFAS treatment. And I think also the more people that, or the more companies that choose to change into PFAS-free products and the more popular they become, the cheaper it will get as well.
Yeah.
We would also say as everything from the beginning, it needs, the change is more expensive at the beginning and it demands research and development costs. We don't have to forget this also for the suppliers. But as we know that this is anyhow, forbidden by law and there's changes. So I think the financial part should not be the main argument.
This is also a question to Houdini and Bergans. How do you work with sort of compiling information about ingredients and information from suppliers? Like, do you have an internal database, external Excel files?
Yeah, I think this is kind of also a change in the work and how we work together with the suppliers. So the dialogue is much more open now, or we even ask, of course, more questions than we did a lot of years ago. So and there's a new way of working together. As we said, we need collaboration and we need this transparency and openness, and this has even to be more intensified, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But for sure, there's really a lot of work to be done, and you showed as well, Lisa, like ask for the material safety data sheet, but it's also like we are not chemists neither, so we can't kind of oversee all risks. So transparency is key, and trust and collaboration. So we need to know kind of that we can, really have a great collaboration with our nominated suppliers. But for sure, data is important here as well.
And use the right, you could say, you use the right supplier where you have this basis for collaboration and trust. Yeah.
Yeah, I would I agree with what you're saying. I would also add that to start with, to set the right requirements. So, for example, we are part of Blue Sign, but we also have our own RSL list that is going even above this. So knowing like where you want to put the limit and communicate that with your partners and suppliers. But also for us, it's really been working. We have very limited number of suppliers where we're only working with a few, and where we are nominating everything from fabric to trims to chemicals, so that you can have more control over what you're using.
I have many questions here. You will do also.
Yeah, I have a number of them.
Yeah.
Maybe I can take one. Yeah, one question for Houdini, which is not directly PFAS related, is how do you define completely circular?
So we have kind of different ways of looking at circular, but if you're looking at the fabrics today, we have one path that is the synthetic path, where we use recycled fibers, and we make sure that they are monomaterials and not mixed with anything that cannot be recycled, so it can go back to the system. So that is one kind of circular. And then we have the natural part. So we talked about wool, but we also are using tencel and biodegradable materials. And here we do not mix it with synthetics. So this is its own area. So and we're not mixing in any treatments like PFAS or other synthetic treatments that will not make these natural materials biodegradable. So that is one way of looking at circular, and of course in the bigger picture of how the product is made, it should also be compliant with this philosophy. But then we are also talking about circularity in a business perspective. So how are we working, copying like the nature and the ecosystem we have rental, we have repairs, we have subscription. So circular is also a business perspective, not only materials.
Thank you.
And to add to that that's also why it's so important to look at the chemicals that goes into the product, because if you would circulate them, you don't want any harmful substances coming back in the recycled material. And I guess also that's something that when talking to different recyclers in different industries, it's a huge tricky area for them, that they get chemicals that are harmful that they don't want to recirculate into the recycled material, and what like how to handle it. So
yeah, I have a question which might not be possible to answer related to that, the sort of next product loop or waste management problem, because Marie asked what would be the best way to handle textiles with PFAS when they become waste, because many companies downcycle textiles, for example, into isolation panels or rags for different uses. But if they contain PFAS, what is is that more contaminating than textile incineration, for example? That's, I leave it open if anyone wants to answer that one.
I think that's sort of it's an important aspect and something that we really want to sort of highlight now if we do like a competence center, because we know there's a lot of knowledge gaps, a lot of research is needed, because we don't really know. We don't know all the waste streams where PFAS is sort of entering. As of now, there is no sorting out PFAS products in the waste stations. We know there is a concern, we know there's a problem, and there's a lot of things to do there. And that's why we also have included a waste perspective and waste companies in the POPFREE industry in this planning project, because it's such an important aspect and a lot of knowledge gaps.
So there are a bunch of questions left. I can take one regarding verifying PFAS-free claims. And I don't know if that's from the brands maybe specifically. If you make a PFAS-free claim, or if you strive to be PFAS-free, how do you secure this from a contamination issue? Yeah. Today, is it enough with assurance, or do you do a lot of chemical analytical testing as well?
We have been doing testing for some products as well to ensure that we don't have the PFAS substances in there. But I think also it's super important to have the good contact with your suppliers to make sure that they use what they are supposed to use, and that they have clean facilities and don't contaminate your product. Then, I mean, it can happen anyway throughout the chain, but the better contact and the better relation you have with your suppliers, then I guess the risk is lower to have contamination.
I have one question which might be interesting to take in this situation too. That's the varying result of the water repellency treatments from different color fabrics. Do you have any? Why does it differ? And have you seen that sort of consistently, or is it something which you have just recently understood? I think it was directed either at Lisa or towards Houdini, who mentioned it in the presentation.
Yeah, so we saw it on some trials that we did in this project with OrganoClick. So of course, depending on what chemical for color you're using, it might be a different result. But we have not completely found the root cause of this, so we're still working on that aspect. But then, of course, also since you have a membrane and different colors will also have a different appearance, also when they get wet. So if you have a jacket that is light or dark, it can look maybe wet or not, but the feeling and the performance is actually the same. So that's also a part of changing mindset. So we see something we think is wet, but actually it's not. So because using PFAS, maybe this have not been the case before, or it has actually also been the case. But so I think the color variation is also something with the change of mindset that needs to be considered. Yes, so, but for the actual testing with OrganoClick, we will investigate more what could be the cause.
I have a question here. It kind of relates. Yeah, basically the question is the difference in the performance, are the differences in the performance, and are PFAS-free treated garments equally good as PFAS treated?
I mean, as we saw on the hike, we could see that PFAS-free garments were actually performing better than some with C6. So I think this is a lot about how the customer, or how like we have talked about a lot today, is it dry before you go out, and how have you reproofed the garment, and how old is it, and so on. So I think that PFAS-free is not showing less good results. It's just that you have to take care of it in a better way, in a good way. Neither, like, it doesn't matter if you're having then PFAS or not. So I think the alternative is just as good.
And this also comes to what you put the garment through, because most of the testing done still is wash and spray testing. And what I've seen in previous tests is also that if you start doing other types of tests, for example, abrasion, you will sometimes find completely different results, where paraffin wax-based treatment is much better than a PFAS-based treatment in terms of abrasion resistance. So this can also be quite different depending on what you subject your test garment to.
We talked a little bit about other types of textiles and not sort of outdoor. There's one comment about PFAS-free firefighter uniforms, whether there is some ongoing work there. It of course relates to this, and maybe that's sort of for the next phase, including more workwear and protective textiles as well. But it's sort of just a comment that this is a very exposed group, just both because of the foam containing PFAS, but also that the uniform may contain PFAS to protect against chemicals and water. So it's another type of textile that is of course important as well. You have some more, Joel?
Yeah, I think we might want to sort of
wrap this up.
This too,
yep.
But I can take one final question. See where we can end this off. Yeah, I think this is a quite specific question. It was after Bergen's presentation, so you might, regarding the testing, I mean the amount of work and time it tests, how far in advance do you start with the testing procedures to ensure that the treatment will actually perform before you launch a product?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we really have to be good in advance, but we also need to kind of align our testing methods so we cannot expand it to be too big. If not, as said, we cannot launch a product. So what we also learned is that we might have a backup option as well. So if like one fabric in the treatment is really not function according to our expectation and the quality requirements, which is then probably not only for the water repellency, but could be also some seam slippage or some tear strength or some other important quality aspects. So it's kind of, we try to have backup solutions, which can be then used until we are done with the development. But it's really, it's a lot of work, I would say, and it's you get a lot of surprises. But as close we can work together with our fabric suppliers and chemical suppliers, the more we can understand and can get great solutions together, I would say. And very important, having this said, once more, it's finding alternatives. We also would like to know what are the alternatives about. So we don't want to have regrettable substitutions, but we need to have alternatives which are future-proof.
Yes. And I think also this is something that has changed over time, of course, that today there are a set of quite well-used formulations that are PFAS-free that you often can resort to when doing this testing on new formulations. So if the new formulation does not work, there are still PFAS-free formulations that may very well work, that are tested and tried for several years on the market. So there's also, it's not only a matter of finding PFAS-free versus PFAS solutions. It's also about what OrganoClick was saying, trying to find the next level, the biodegradable solutions or the natural-based solutions among the PFAS-free. So that's also development that is ongoing. So meaning that we might have different levels of innovation and uncertainty within the PFAS-free as well. So
good. Should we say that was the last question?
Yes, I think we should wrap that up. And
yes.
There are a couple of other questions. I will direct them to the participant or to the speakers afterwards, and we can take care of them as well. Yeah.
So for those of you that are still listening, thank you again for participating in this webinar. Feel free to contact us if you have any further questions or comments. And yeah, go PFAS free.